Hey Chris, let's stop down here,
Yeah.
right at the edge of the forest, where we can check out this wetland.
Yeah, so we're right at the edge of an upland forested area and a low-lying wetland complex that's bordering Centennial Brook. What this wetland does are the exact sort of processes that we're trying to mimic up on campus by slowing water down with green infrastructure. So this wetland here is a result in part because of beaver activity and damming and creating this wetland, but it serves so many important purposes for us and for wildlife. These are ecosystem services. So this wetland will serve to filter out sediment and other pollutants before they enter the brook. It'll serve to attenuate and slow down the stormwater that's coming down here. It'll attenuate a flooding event and allow that energy to be dissipated more slowly out over the floodplain and throughout the wetland, which protects downstream communities from flood damage. And it provides all sorts of really important wildlife habitat. So we've got a wetland here and then a steeper slope going up into the forest.
Yeah, and this ecotone here, this transition, it's pretty abrupt here. Suddenly we go from this wetland vegetation into the forest, just looking around, dominated by all these massive white pines and hemlock trees and beautiful dead snags where trees have died in place, providing habitat for all sorts of species. For instance, wood ducks, potentially could use spots like that if they're near a pond. So that connection to the wetland is important. There's many other, bird and wildlife species. Moose have been seen here in Centennial Woods, and that use both wetlands and forested areas. Fisher, and a whole diversity of bird species I'm hearing in here. And I'd love to explore this with all of you, this upland forest as it rises up out of the wetlands. Again, the changes in the hydraulic in the soil are really controlling this transition from wetland vegetation to upland forest in here. So I think Chris, it really makes sense that we look at the soils in more detail here in a minute, because we really want to illustrate this idea of the landscape almost as a layer cake, where you go from the underlying geology that's been exposed by the erosive force of the streams, and we see the sediments that the soils are forming here in the upland that date to processes that occurred 15,000 years ago as the glacier was retreating, and this whole area was at one time covered by at first glacial Lake Vermont, and then after that the Champlain Sea, and has slowly been exposed through time. And we can see down in the next layer, all the ferns that are down low, the deciduous trees that are coming up, the trees that are in the mid-story like this hemlock here, and then we get into the upper forested areas and all the way up towards the canopy, and we can really build a layer cake and think about the structure or the architecture of the forest, which is so critical to providing a diversity of nesting habitat for instance, all these birds that we're seeing. So great spot. Centennial Woods provides this diversity.